and rolling. Welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm sharing my solo story, and really that story and more, and some stories that I've actually never shared before. In fact, a story that, geez, maybe I've shared with my online ground school members in passing, but never in like the detail I'm going to share with you about the first and only time I've ever been fired by a student. And it involved a solo, which is a great takeaway lesson from this. I'm going to share with you my solo story. I'm going to share with you a solo mishap story, as well as how I was fired by a student, and rightfully so, too. I was, young and naive. And then how you can solo sooner through all of this. We're going to teach through stories, through real world situations, because that's how I like to do it. Guys, a little bit about how this works, what's going to happen. I know you guys know the drill by now. This is our third webinar together, back to back to back, but I'm going to present. Feel free to ask your questions at any time. Now, you and I communicate via that handy dandy GoToWebinar control panel underneath the questions tab. If you're on the iPad, tap a little question mark. You can type in your questions there. I can't hear you. I can't see you. So kids screaming, dogs barking, don't worry about that. But when it happens here at the Shappert household, which is likely, as Ashley just put little Ella down, who knows? We'll welcome you to the family when you hear Pito and Magneto barking, Ella crying, and everything else. This is being recorded, by the way, just like the two previous webinars were. So if you're looking for help prepping for your FAA written test, if you're looking for ways to save money on your flight training, those two webinars are up on YouTube, and this one will follow shortly after we get done here. I know you guys all know me, but for those of you who don't, maybe a friend invited you here. My name is Jason Shappert. I have 9,000 hours of flight training. When I say of flight training, I mean of teaching and creating other pilots. A lot of time. Just past the 9,000 hour mark, and can't wait to get to that 10,000 hour mark. I was named AOPA's Outstanding Flight Instructor in 2014, and last year we contributed to 25%. Our online ground school contributed to 25% of those FAA written tests taken. Let's get down to business. Let's talk about solos. Now, you need to understand that first things first, what are my solo requirements? Well, I need to be at least 16 years of age. You can do like I did. I was fortunate enough to solo at the age of 16. You need to hold a current FAA medical certificate. That becomes your student pilot certificate. Complete a pre-solo written test. A lot of people don't realize that. Now, the pre-solo written test is very easy. It's something your instructor has. They literally create one and administer it to you. It could be one question. It could be like mine, which is like 50 questions. But I like to make my students overachievers in a way. There is no hour requirement to solo. A lot of people say, how many hours do I need to solo? There is no hour requirement to actually solo. If you're ready to go and you meet the above 3 requirements, then you are ready to go. So with that, guys, I want to dive in and tell you kind of a little bit about my solo story here for a bit. So we're going to stay on this slide for a second here. So I'm going to kind of give you my solo story. So I started very, very young. I actually was fortunate enough to start. I took my very first flight lesson at 12 years of age, believe it or not. When I was 15, I was able to formally start those flight lessons and continue to work on it with the goal, like so many, of soloing when you're 16. Well, I was getting real close to that solo. And I remember my instructor saying to me, Jason, if you can nail this landing on this, that we have an 8 2/6 runway at Ocala. It's very narrow. It's 50 feet wide. It's maybe a 3,000 feet long, not even. It's very narrow. You come in over this Kmart distribution center, then over a road, then over some power lines. It's just a lot of obstacles. In Florida in the summertime, it's hot. It's a very challenging landing even today. And I remember my instructor said to me, Jason, if you can nail this landing, I'll solo you. I'm thinking, no problem. Don't you worry about it. I will. I've got this thing all under control. And I'm coming in. And I'm too high, and then I'm too low, and then I'm too fast, and then I'm too slow, and I'm left of the runway and right. And all of a sudden these oscillations started happening where I was way left of the runway, way right of the runway. And I was going back and forth, left of the runway, right of the runway. We're continuing to lose altitude here. And we get lower and lower and lower. And finally, I am way, way right of the runway. I'm talking 100 feet away, and I'm only 50 feet above the ground. And my CFI, she looks at me and says, Jason, what are you going to do? And I knew the right thing to do was to go around. So I said, don't you worry. I'm going to go ahead and do a go around. We'll try it again. In my mind, I was like committed to this lane. I wanted to nail it so I could solo, right? Don't we want to do that? But I kind of put my tail between my legs and said, all right, I'll do a go around. And I never really studied go arounds. We never really practiced go arounds. In fact, go arounds are a very underutilized and under practiced maneuver. So don't ever feel bad when you do a go around. I went to do that go around, and this isn't a Cherokee 140. And in a Cherokee 140, we had manual flaps. They kind of look like an emergency brake on a car. That handle you pick up. I grabbed that handle. This is the first thing I did. I took those flaps out all at once. I dropped them to the floor. Guys, at 50 feet above the ground, I didn't add power in first. I just dropped the flaps. What do you think happened to the airplane? I sank like a rock. We came down. We were in the grass way right of the runway. We bounced. The ground it's not meant for landing. I just landed basically in an unapproved landing site, effectively. There could have been gopher holes. Who knows what the grass was like, knee high, because you don't need to mow out there. No one's supposed to land there. But sure enough, I did. And we are bouncing. The instructor gets on the controls, pulls the yoke all the way back. I had no clue what a soft field landing was, but she was basically doing one for me here. And I remember just letting go and just watching her. My eyes were so wide. I'm thinking, I just literally controlled crashed an airplane. As she goes and she kind of hops it up on the taxiway, watching out for runway lights and everything else, and taxi us on. And I will never forget, it was the most awkward silence. After she said a few curse words, it was the most awkward silence. I remember my hands were shaking. My feet were shaking. Literally, we had just done a controlled crash. Here I am thinking this lady is going to solo me, and I go and miss the runway by 100 feet because of a bonehead maneuver that she has to jump on the controls and save the day. And I kid you not, as we are taxiing back in, she didn't even look at me, but the comment was piercing. She said to me, Jason, maybe you're not meant to be a pilot. And I remember as we're taxiing in, I'm shaking, I am nervous. This person that I idolize basically is my mentor, basically told me, listen, if you can't get the basic stuff like a go around, maybe this flying thing is not for you. I literally almost gave up. I remember we taxied on in. I grabbed my stuff. At this point, I wasn't even driving yet. So my parents took me to my flight lessons. They were waiting in the parking lot. I remember I just walked straight to the car and I got in. I didn't say anything. And I remember just crying later, as silly as that sounds. But anything that you're that attached to, and flying was for me, was just, it was devastating. And I had a flight lesson scheduled, 2 days afterwards, turning 16, here comes my birthday, getting ready to solo and all this sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I was too embarrassed to go back to the flight school. I was too embarrassed to see my flight instructor again. it I'm thinking they don't want to see me. I'm not good enough. I'm not meant to be a pilot. But I remember my mother said to me, she said, Jason, this is your dream. This is what you've been bugging me about, since you're a little kid. Um, get out there, suck it up, and go do it. So I did, I faced my fears with that, and of course had an uneventful solo. We did some recurrent training after that silly landing, of course, and had an uneventful solo. And I'll never forget looking over in the right seat. I couldn't help but look at that right seat and just smile because no one was there. And trust me, they weren't the prettiest landings. They weren't the greatest takeoffs. They were kind of sloppy traffic patterns, but they were 3 landings that I did all on my own. But it'd be great if the story stopped there, but the story doesn't stop there. The story gets even better here. So at the time, the Ocala airport was an uncontrolled or pilot-controlled airport. It was a pilot-controlled airport. So I had to go to a towered airport to do my 3 takeoffs and landings at a towered field, right? Those of you who've done any amount of flying know that you got to do 3 solo takeoffs and landings to a full stop at a towered airport. No big deal. I had to go up to the Gainesville airport. I had just recently soloed. And here's the funny thing. My instructor and I literally flew up to Gainesville. We did 3 takeoffs and landings. We came back. She signed me off, got out of the airplane, said, okay, monkey see, monkey do. Go do what I just did and talk to the controllers the exact same way we just did. So I did. I hopped in the airplane. Now I'm departing, not quite a solo cross country. But and again, this is days after my first solo. I fly up to the Gainesville airport and I call up Gainesville Tower and let them know I have the ATIS. I'm a little bit shaky on the radios and everything else, but it kind of works out. They tell me to land runway 24, and I land runway 24, and that's all good. And I let them know I have to do a full stop taxi back for the regulations because that's what it says. They say no big deal. Go ahead and land. And, taxi off the runway, taxi back to runway 24. So I land, I go to get off the runway, and this is how bonehead it was. Instead of making a left to go back to the runway, I make a right, off the taxiway. I have no idea why. I mean, it should be pretty easy. I landed this way. It should just be a matter of making a U-turn. And I remember I made the right-hand turn. And the controller comes on the radio, and I kid you, I couldn't make this story up if I wanted to. The controller comes on the radio and says, 6711 Juliet, what are you doing? I say, well, sir, I'm a student pilot. I'm from the Ocala airport, and I'm up here doing my 3 takeoffs and landings because Ocala doesn't have a tower, and it's required by regulations. And he cuts me off and says, no, 6711 Juliet, what are you doing? I said, well, I kind of just told you that. I'm up here doing my landings, and I just did 1. I got 2 more to go, so I'm going to be with you for a while. And finally, he keys the mic again and says, no, 11 Juliet, stop. Just stop right where you are. You're going the wrong way. It was like a bad episode or a bad edition of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You're going the wrong way. I was a little bit embarrassed, and I literally tucked my tail between my legs. I made a U-turn right there on the taxiway and started taxiing back the proper way to the runway. And of course, it would be funny if the story stopped there. But the story doesn't stop there. The story never stops there with me, it seems like, early on in my flight training. I taxied all the way down. I didn't need to do a run-up. And to this day, I don't know why I did this, because I second-guessed doing this. I remember it specifically, even though it's been, over a decade now. I remember I finally got down to the end of runway 24, and I didn't stop. I just kept on going. I got right out in the middle of the runway, held my brakes, and gave Tower a call and said, Tower, 6711 Juliet's on runway 24, ready for takeoff. And I kid you, I cannot repeat the words that controller said to me. but it wasn't pretty. Uh, Here I am taxiing the wrong way, rambling to this guy about something he doesn't care about. I cause a runway incursion, taxi out onto his runway. Thankfully, nobody was coming, but I certainly wasn't cleared out onto that runway. I did my other takeoffs and landings and went straight back to Ocala, and I was, again, the thoughts running through my head, maybe I'm not meant to be a pilot. You hear stories like this, and I'm going back on in, and I have a decent landing back at Ocala. I remember my instructor is standing on the ramp waiting for me. I thought that's a little bit weird that she's standing on the ramp waiting for me. I'm thinking maybe she knows something. And I remember I got out of the airplane and she looked at me and goes, "So how'd it go?" I'm like, "It was good." She goes, "Anything happened you want to tell me about?" I'm like, "Nope, not that I can think of." And you and I both know what happened. Gainesville Tower did some quick research on who owned 6711 Juliet, found out real quick, and got my instructor on the phone. Um, it's stories like that. It's the reason I tell you that, guys, is because if I can do it, here I am now, a 9,000 hour flight instructor, named AOPA's Outstanding Flight Instructor of the Year, yet we all have a history. We all are going to make screw ups. We're all going to have some mistakes. They may not be on your solo. They may not. We're all going to have something. We're going to have something we're not proud of, some sort of goof up, something that happens. I just want you to know that if I can do it, you can do it. Because my screw ups were big. And really, my screw ups don't stop there. That's just what I can give you in this short little time we have together, because we're already 20 minutes into our webinar, believe it or not, just about. If I can do it, you can do it. That's what I want to share with you guys. And that's why I share with you my solo story. The truth is, you can't get discouraged, because sometimes we set these crazy expectations and you can't do that. You cannot set crazy expectations. I'm going to solo in 5 hours. If I don't solo before so and so, I'm giving up flying. You just can't do that, because beyond your skill, there's so many things outside of your control. Weather, maintenance, instructor availability, and scheduling. When you set crazy expectations, you set yourself up for failure, which leads me to another story, and then I'll start sharing with you some of my solo tips here for you guys. That my couple hundred, I'd have to look at the number, but it's in the hundreds of students that I've soloed. But another solo story, and this is actually a story where the only time I've ever been fired as a flight instructor, and it was all because of that last slide, which was setting unrealistic expectations. I flew with a lady, very, very sweet, sweet lady, and nobody could get this lady to solo for some reason. And we'd continue, we were working, and she had a bunch of different instructors after instructors, and we continued to work and finally, she found me as an instructor. I said, "Listen, I can get you to solo." And we worked on some of these kinks and everything else as we worked through it, and we were getting to the point where I said, "Listen, you're getting close to solo. We're close." And I said, "I think," it was like a Monday, I said, "I think I can have you solo by the end of the week on Friday." And that was my mistake. I set the expectation of saying, "You can solo on Friday." Well, guess what happened? She went out and told all her friends that she was going to be soloing on Friday. I didn't realize that. And we did a little flying Tuesday, a little flying Wednesday, and I'm noticing that she's getting real nervous as Friday's getting closer, because I put this date out there, and she's starting to get a little bit nervous as this solo looms. Well, finally Friday morning comes, and she's got all her friends waiting there. I'm thinking, geez, this is a lot of pressure for me, because it's my signature ultimately in the logbook. Everyone's expecting to see this lady solo. Everyone's waiting. We got up there and we did some landings, and the landings were just bad. You just have a bad day sometimes in aviation. It just happens. But The pressure of her friends being there, the pressure of the expectations I set saying, Friday, you can solo, had all crept up. And then together she's sitting here going, and she is so nervous that her landings were just bad. I mean, worse than before. And I had to break it to her. I said, I'm sorry, but I can't solo you today. You're just not flying good enough. Your head is just not in the game today. And I kid you not, after that, I had lost a student because it was embarrassing. Well, it was embarrassing for me as well. But when you set expectations like that, and when you have definite dates, nerves creep in and things happen. Now, when I solo a student, I kid you not, when they taxi the end of the runway, I say, okay, hold the plane here, bring the throttle back to idle. Um, and I literally just get out of the airplane. And I have a handheld radio and I talk to them from there. You have to catch students off guard nowadays. Otherwise, they have too much time to think about it. And sometimes if you have too much time to think about it, like in the case of the story I just shared with you, you end up goofing it up sometimes. Let's talk about some of those solo tips I have for you. Really, the average, what you need to understand is the average solo is 25 hours. 25 hours is the average in what it takes a student to solo. Now, by no means do I want you to ever compare yourself to this average, because that's an average in all sorts of different airplanes, from Cessna 150s to Cirrus SR-20s. It really skews those numbers all over the place. So whether you're above this or whether you're well under this, it really doesn't mean anything to me. What really matters to me is how well you do on your written test, and what kind of great things the check ride examiner has to say about you at the end of your check ride. That's what really matters to me. But just know, keep in the back of your mind, the average solo is 25 hours. Now, and I get these emails a lot where I talk to students and say, Jason, listen, I'm 20 hours into this and my instructor hasn't even hinted that he or she is getting ready to solo me. And sometimes as a student, you're certainly allowed to ask, like, hey, how close am I, do you think, to getting to solo? Now, again, you're not fishing for an exact date or anything like that, but you're just kind of saying, listen, am I getting close? Am I making progress towards that solo? And that's a fair question to ask, and you can. And I've dealt with students like that all the time, where they get 20 hours into it and they're all discouraged that they haven't soloed yet, when you don't even realize the average is 25 hours. So don't get discouraged if that is you. Now, let's talk about some tips here. Now, I've got 3 tips. Then we'll open it up for your questions as we wrap up this great webinar series. Tip number 1 to solo sooner. We talked about this on webinar number 1. It's to chair fly your traffic pattern, and that includes the radio calls. Chair fly your traffic pattern and your radio calls. And here's the best way to do it. I go out on the ramp with my students. You can do this in your driveway, in your backyard. It doesn't matter. I've seen people spray paint a runway in their backyard and practice that way. Awesome. Literally, on the ramp, I stand side by side next to my student. They're to the left of me, I'm to the right of them, just like we're really in the airplane. We pick a crack in the concrete or in the pavement or a line on the ramp. We use that as our runway, or we take a piece of chalk and literally draw a runway, and we walk our traffic pattern. Okay, I'm on the upwind. What am I doing? All right, when do I turn crosswind? If I'm at an uncontrolled, pilot-controlled airport, what does my crosswind radio call sound like? When do I make that turn? What am I looking for? When do I turn downwind? What does that radio call sound like? And we talk through everything. What you're doing with the throttle, when you're bringing the carpet out, when you're adding flaps in, what altitude you're at, what your radio calls are like. And when you can walk that rectangular course, that traffic pattern, you're saving yourself so much. Again, we talked about this in webinar 1. I don't need to dwell on it, that every 2 hours you spend on the ground saves you time up in the air. Big time, okay? Spend more time on the ground. That's what I'm getting at. The airplane is a terrible classroom. It's hot, it's moving way too fast, it's way too loud, and there's no pause button to pause and say, wait a second, Mr. or Miss CFI, can you go over that again? Well, you can make them go over it again, but it's going to cost you another 15 minutes at almost $200 an hour. It's expensive. Chair fly your traffic pattern plus your radio calls. A lot of times when I see students struggling with landings, it's because their radio calls put them behind the airplane. See, they can either just land the airplane or just communicate through the traffic pattern. But getting them to do both is very difficult. So become a master of those radio calls. It's a lot to multitask like that. And those radio calls could set you back just a half a second behind that airplane. And when you're going 90 to 100 to 110 knots, a half a second is everything because they all compound. Tip number 1, chair fly your traffic pattern. Go buy some sidewalk chalk, steal it from the kids, your kids that is, and go out in the driveway and draw your runway. Spray paint in the backyard if the wife doesn't mind. Do whatever it takes to chair fly your traffic pattern and walk through it. Your neighbors are going to think you're crazy, but it's going to make you a safer, smarter pilot with more money in your pocket, I promise. Tip number 2 to solo sooner is to have your CFI demonstrate to you a perfect pattern and a perfect landing. In the book, The Secret to Perfect Landings, one of my tips is a perfect landing starts with a perfect traffic pattern. Well, how do I know what a perfect traffic pattern looks like if I've never seen one? So have your CFI start on the ground. Do the takeoff, the upwind, the crosswind, the downwind, the base, and the final. And you just sit there. You listen to their radio calls. You see when they key the mic. You watch when they make their turns. Watch their hands with the throttle. Put your feet on the rudder pedals as well and follow them on the rudder pedals. Don't just sit there passively and enjoy it. Take it all in. Looking inside at their hands, feeling what their feet are doing, looking outside at the sight picture. When you're on the downwind, notice how far away am I from the runway? Because there's a big difference if you're creeping in on the runway or getting too far away from the runway on downwind. You got to fly that perfectly rectangular traffic pattern. Landings are all about where you put your eyes. And it's not just before you touch down, it's through the entire traffic pattern. Have your CFI demonstrate to you a perfect pattern and a perfect landing, and take a ton of mental notes. Tip number 3 to solo sooner, and then we'll wrap it up here and take your questions, your comments. If the landings are an issue for you, the greatest tip I can give you is this: slow flight down the runway. This is actually probably the best tip inside the book, The Secret to Perfect Landings. Slow flight down the runway. Why do we do slow flight? We do slow flight to get better at landings. I wish someone would have told me that before I was basically a commercial pilot at that point. CFI, I think I was becoming a CFI when it finally clicked for me. I wish someone would have told me, Jason, get good at slow flight, get really good at landings. Hopefully I'm telling you that today and it clicks for you, because why do we practice slow flight? I used to think, why do I want to get the airplane so close to a stall? The stall warning horn is blaring. I can't see anything out front. The flight controls are sloppy. It's all about using the rudders. It doesn't make sense to me. Why don't I just practice stalls? Why do I have to hold it right here on the brink of a stall? That's because right before we touch down, we're in slow flight. As we enter into ground effect, we're effectively in a version of slow flight. And if you get good at slow flight, learning how to manipulate and control that airplane and let you fly the airplane, not let the airplane fly you, you're going to become an expert at landings. So my challenge to you is to go out and do slow flight down the runway. Go find the longest runway you can. Chances are it's probably towered. Ask for a low approach, and I want you to go on down, and I want you to hold that. Really, you should request the option because you might accidentally touch down. I want you to go and hold that airplane inches off the ground. Do whatever it takes not to touch the ground. You're going to have to give it a little bit of power, but I want you to hold that airplane inches off the ground. Take your eyes down that runway and learn to control the airplane with a little bit of aileron movement and a little bit more rudder control. Because too often we get into ground effect and we give up on the airplane. If you find yourself landing left of center line, 9 times out of 10 is because you're getting ground effect and you kind of stop flying the airplane. The airplane just falls naturally out of the sky. You have to fly that airplane all the way to the hangar. You can't let the airplane fly you that last 25 feet in ground effect. And that's why we practice slow flight down the runway. Pick the longest runway you can, hold it inches if you can off the ground, take your eyes down the runway, hold center line, and do a go around at about the halfway point so you have plenty of time to get up and out of there and baby your flaps out in increments on that go around so you don't end up like I was in that first story I share with you. Guys, those are 3 great tips to solo sooner. Set realistic expectations. Remember, the average is 25 hours. Don't get discouraged if you're a little bit below or even above average, guys. Just when you solo, you solo. You want to be as safe as possible. Don't fall into the trap of trying to do it by a certain number or a certain day or having family members out there. I don't even invite family members out to solos anymore because of that situation. I just catch you by surprise now. I don't even care if you're wearing your nice Ralph Lauren shirt. We're going to cut it anyways. We cut shirt tails on solos. That's just how it works, all right? Those are my 3 tips to solo sooner. I mentioned the book, The Secret to Perfect Landings here, by the way. And by the way, I appreciate all you guys. I saw we had a mad rush of people sign up for the online ground school before this webinar. I'm very blessed and thankful for that. Guys, this is the last night to get the bonus I've been talking about the previous 2 nights. If you become a bronze, silver, or gold member by going to groundschoolacademy.com, I'm going to give you all 8 of my flight training books and audiobooks. It's $220 worth of books for free just for signing up. You get past your private pilot check ride, past your instrument pilot check ride. Both these books, I sat in on hundreds of check rides, wrote down every question they asked, provide you the best answer. They're also on audiobook. So while you're walking the dog, you're on the treadmill, you got a long commute to work or to the airport, you can be always learning. Why? Because a good pilot is always learning. I read the audiobook. I ask you the check ride question. I pause for a second, let you think about the best answer in your head, and then I reveal to you the right answer. We also have the FAR Aim in plain English. I took that giant 2,000-page book, broke it down to about 120 pages, took out all the lawyer, legal, government speak, and told you what this regulation means to you in plain English and how it pertains to you. The book, The Secret to Perfect Landings, which has over 4 hours of video that you've never seen before inside of it, on crosswind, soft field, short field, normal landings, traffic patterns, emergencies, that sort of stuff. In-flight emergencies book is the same way. Videos on engine failures on takeoff, engine fires on start, engine fires in flight, carbon monoxide poisoning, all that sort of stuff. Aviation acronyms, the Pilot's Handbook for Aeronautical Knowledge, the Airplane Flying Handbook, are editions that we rewrote with the good faith of the FAA. Gold members, it's $147 a month. You get access every Monday night to me via our live weekly webinars and mock check rates. If you enjoyed this webinar, I do a webinar like this every Monday night without fail. It's a chance to interact with myself, our great team here at MzeroA.com. We present on very specific topics. We did one on crosswind landings. Well, just last week or on Monday this week, we did a mock check ride where I quizzed you on real FAA check ride questions. And I got to give you instant feedback saying, hey, John, I wouldn't answer the question that way. I would say this instead of this on your check ride. We always say, wouldn't you rather get the questions wrong here with me on this webinar than on the day when you spend $400, $500, $600? You get access as a gold member to our FAA written test prep boot camp. Plus, you get an endorsement. You don't even have to have a CFI yet. I can actually give you the endorsement electronically, and you can march down to any testing center to go ahead and take that FAA written test. By the way, we just reshot about 75% of our private pilot online ground school into new 4K video formats, 4 times the quality of HD, as well as our entire FAA written test prep boot camp is now in 4K and up to the new ACS Airman certification standards. Of course, as a gold member, you get our pass your check ride or I'll pay for it guarantee. Out of thousands and thousands of check rides, I've only had 2 people ever have to redeem that. GroundSchoolAcademy.com is where you need to go. Click enroll or join today. The bonus offer expires tonight at 11:59 Eastern Time, guys. After that, you're still welcome to sign up. You just won't get the bonus offer of getting all 8 of my books just for signing up, plus getting the FAA written test prep boot camp, all that sort of stuff if you end up becoming a gold member. Once you are signed up and you're logged in, you have your login, your password, go to groundschoolacademy.com/books to start that download. It's a fairly large file, as you could imagine, because it's MP3s, PDFs, that sort of stuff. It's a zip file. Download it to your computer and then unzip it and then take those individual files and drag them over to your iPad or iPhone, however you want to read and listen to those. GroundSchoolAcademy.com, click enroll or join today. Guys, it's Q&A time. It's your time now. I'm going to open up this box and get started here. I'm going to grab a sip of tea here first. By the way, I know a ton of you guys have already signed up for this offer, and I'm very, very blessed and very, very thankful for you to do that. Let's see here. I am just... Demarian asked, where can I find my student pilot certificate number on my 3rd class medical? So it'll be at the very, very top. I can't remember what letters they're starting on now. Most recently, they usually start with some letters like F, N, dash, and they give you some numbers at the very, very top of your student pilot certificate or your medical. You'll see those there. James D said, I soloed after 44 hours, but then his check ride, it was just 10 hours after that. And see, that's what I mean, James. That's why we can't get tied up on numbers and such. Because yeah, it took you 44 hours, but then you took your check ride 10 hours after that. So really, I guarantee you soloed, James D, and then you just had to knock out your solo cross country stuff and it was time for a check ride. So absolutely, you just can't get hung up on this sort of stuff. Aaron said, Jason, so in soloing, is the main focus just being able to take off and land the plane right, or does it entail me being very proficient with other maneuvers too? So, Aaron, I will not solo a student. This is just me until you're proficient in steep turn, slow flight, stalls, as well as and especially emergency procedures. Because, Aaron, the moment I let you go and I let you solo, you're only endorsed to solo at that airport. But what if something went wrong? And you were only proficient, like you said, in takeoffs and landings, and the engine quits. Well, we never practice emergency approaches and that sort of stuff. I make you get real proficient at that. I make you get really good at stall recoveries because maybe something silly happens, you get a little bit slowed turning base to final, but you still have a chance to fix it, and you're aware of how dangerous a stall can be, so now you know to watch your airspeed. So I make my students get more proficient in those areas, but we work on takeoffs and landings, most definitely. Usually by the 3rd or 4th lesson, we're kind of introducing takeoffs and landings and working on it. That's just my approach to it. My students solo a little bit later than most students, still under the FAA average of 25 hours, but that's just kind of when I'm a little bit of a paranoid mother bird, because think about it too, Aaron. Not only is my certificate on the line, but these students are soloing my airplane. I own the airplane and my certificate's on the line. I got a lot at stake here. I want them to be really, really good. So that's just me. Hey, Sean. Sean said, I'm having issues getting past the transition without CFI guidance. I'm pulling back too early and not enough for my instructor's liking once we're near wheels down. Any tips for nailing when to start the transition and how much back pressure to use? Well, Sean, you already used a great word like transition. So I imagine you've dove into a lot of the ground school videos, the secret to perfect landings, that sort of stuff. Sean, slow flight down the runway was custom made for someone like yourself. If you find either A, the ground is sneaking up on you too soon, or B, you think the ground's coming, you think the ground's coming, you think the ground's coming, but it's just not there yet, you're a little bit too early, you need to practice slow flight down the runway. It's all about where you put your eyes. Take your eyes down that runway, my friend. That is what I want you to do. Cool stuff with that. Let's see. David E. said, I'm coming back to flying after a 15-year layoff and will need to solo again. All my previous training was in Piper low wings. Will there be a learning curve when I solo a high wing 172? Any differences? If you're coming off 15 years, I'm going to say no, David, because it's going to be kind of like starting over, but not quite. You've got the aviation bug. You got a little bit of skill there. Do the aircraft fly differently? Absolutely they do. And if you were saying, hey, it's been 6 months and I'm making the transition, it might be a bit of an issue. But David, it's going to be a learning curve whether you hop back in the exact same airplane or whether you hop in a 172. I wouldn't sweat that too much. However, a 172 is going to float a little bit more than, say, your Cherokee 140 that you were flying. Let's see. Here's my buddy David D. Hey, David D. He said, Jason, how do you feel about using reference marks on the windshield to help a new student get used to visualizing attitudes? I'm actually a fan of this, David. I did a video a while ago, David. I want to say over a year ago, where I put a circle on the windshield, and we actually recreated. We put a circle in the video itself, and we were on a long approach. And I said, okay, I want to do whatever it takes to keep the numbers 3-6 in this circle on my windshield. And I showed how when you get too low, how that point moves on the windshield. And I show when you get too high, how that point moves on the windshield. So absolutely, I'm a fan of that. Just make sure you're doing it right. Make sure you have an instructor who's done that before with that. Let's see. Keith S. As a student pilot, how far can I legally fly from my home base airport? So, Keith, you actually have to get endorsed for every airport you want to go to. Now, as a solo pilot, you're able to fly within 25 nautical miles of that airport, but you cannot touch down at any airport that you're not endorsed to touch down at. So when I have a student solo, I endorse them for Ocala, for Denellen, for Crystal River, for Williston, for Gainesville, for all the 5 or 6 airports that are around here. I have to endorse them for every specific airport. So you can go 25 nautical miles away from the airport you're endorsed to, but you just can't touch down anywhere that you're not endorsed to. Let's see. Keith also said, on a solo cross country, can I make a stop or layover? Yeah, you can, certainly, Keith, as long as it's okay with your instructor. Like if you're going to do a solo cross country to go meet a family member or a friend, something like that, you certainly can do a stopover as long as your instructor is okay with it. Let's see. Elizabeth said, if someone buys the gold membership and takes the check ride within a month of having the membership, does the money back guarantee still count? Absolutely, Elizabeth, it still counts. As long as, Elizabeth, you're not just a gold member, I want you to be an active gold member. You can't just say, oh, I'm a member. I want you to be an active gold member, and I know you will because you're making an investment in yourself. And I'd be willing to bet you're close to the check ride. You can, hop in, pick up the areas where you want to work on and everything else. So absolutely. So Stephen asked the average. Oh, average is 25 hours, Stephen, is the FAA average. Um, James B, another James B here. He said, after watching a few videos, I get the impression that the rudder is the big knob for slow flight as opposed to the ailerons. You mentioned that rudder is the control I need to use if I'm landing left of center. Yes. So here's how it is. Think about it, James. When you're coming into land, there is very little wind, very little air flowing over those wings, thus rendering those ailerons less effective than they are when you're going 110, 120 knots. They're just less effective. They're still effective, they just take more input. That's why the rudder has greater control at those slower air speeds. Because the rudder's like literally like holding your hand out the window. You're wagging that tail out there, and that's what's going to move you regardless of your airspeed there. So absolutely, if you find yourself landing left of center, I actually have a video, James B, I want you to go watch. I think it's called Help, I'm Landing Left of Center Line. It's on MzeroA.com, or just search for it. Type in MzeroA landing left of center line, and you'll find it that way. And it talks exactly about what you're sharing. Let's see. Cool stuff. John G said, what level of membership do we need to have to get Jason's endorsement? So with the gold membership, John, you get access to the FAA written test prep boot camp, which gives you that endorsement. Again, I issue that endorsement. You can print that off and take that to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the U.S. that does FAA written tests. And you can use that there. So that is cool. Yo, James, you already saw that video. Okay, good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of right rudder is all it takes sometimes. That P factor, that torque factor, and ground effect is very prominent and will pull you to the left sometimes. Guys, I don't see any other questions. Maybe I missed something. It's quite possible. A bunch of stuff all came in at once. Any other questions? Any other comments? Now is your time to ask them. Again, you and I communicate using that handy dandy GoToWebinar control panel underneath the questions tab. You can type in your questions there. I'm gonna grab another sip of tea here real quick. What a great webinar series too, by the way, guys. Just so much fun to do this. I know for my East Coast guys, it's a little bit late. I appreciate you hanging out with us. Listen, I appreciate all you guys who have signed up for the online ground school. You are truly a blessing to Ashley and I. I promise we will not let you down. You're going to love the course. You get a chance to interact with us each and every Monday night. It's really great stuff. I see some more questions coming in here. I'll take those. Aaron said, how long is that endorsement good for after I am awarded? The written test endorsement, I want to say, is 90 days, but I'm not positive on that. I'd have to look that up in the FARs. But I want to say it's 90 days. Is that, Aaron? And if for some reason you need an extension on that, we can certainly do that for you as long as you're continuing to learn. Krishna asked, how about ground school for sport pilot certificate? So here's my thing. And I shared a little bit about this last night. So first off, we have a good bit of our population in there is working on their sport pilot, because here's the thing. The raw skill of flying doesn't change. METARs, airspace, the physics of flying doesn't change. The only thing that's different for sport pilot is a few regulations. And in the book, The FAR Aim in Plain English, I point out how the sport pilot regs differ from the private pilot regs. Other than that, there's really no need for a sport pilot specific ground school, because there's just a few rule changes is all it is. Now, Krishna, here's the other thing. And the reason I haven't done anything else sport pilot wise is because if the FAA, and they just hit another snag to this, we were talking about this yesterday, they hit another snag now that Congress, or I don't follow politics, but whatever, has taken their little summer siesta. That's now delayed a little bit. They're trying to get rid of the third class medical. It's now delayed because they're on their summer break, Congress or whoever's trying to pass it lately here. Again, I don't follow politics much. When they pass that, what does that do to the sport pilot certificate? Because all sport pilot certificate is I fly without a medical, and I've got some regulations, can't no more than 2 people under this weight, no 10,000 feet or under 10,000 feet, not at night, that sort of stuff. If we get rid of the medical, what happens to the sport pilot certificate? That's my opinion, because someone asked last night, should I get my sport and then go private pilot? And yeah, you could, but if and when they pass this thing, what does a sport pilot certificate mean? I don't know. We'll all find that out together. I don't have that answer just yet. Let's see. John G, no, you would just pay that difference. Is all that is. Kent said, always learn lots on the webinars. Well, thank you so much, Kent. I appreciate that. Let's see. Demarion said, my final 500 feet coming over the threshold, my aircraft always seems to balloon. 5 feet away, I try to hold my 70 knots, but I always kind of over flare is the word he uses. How does one fix that? So first off, and I don't have time to get into it now, lose the word flare from your vocabulary. That's a huge tip I have in the book, The Secret to Perfect Landings, because we don't flare. When you think of a flare, you're going to balloon every time. Instead, think of transitioning into slow flight down the runway. It's the same thing, Demarion. Slow flight down the runway is what you need to do. I promise you, I've seen it time and time again. It's like flipping a magic switch. I can have a student who is really goofing up some landings. We do slow flight down the runway once, they come back and they just grease the next landing in. It sounds so crazy, it sounds far-fetched, but I promise you it works. Let's see. Denton, thanks so much, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you more inside the ground school, my friend. Really excited about that. Martin said, how long is the written test good for prior to flying? So Martin, after you pass the written test, you have 24 calendar months, 2 years, to pass the check ride. So it's certainly an incentive, because you don't want to have to do the written test again to then go become a pilot. You have 2 years to actually do that. James B says, is it dangerous to put too much rudder in ground effect? Well, too much anything can be dangerous, James B. I think you're overthinking it a little bit. Yes, it does replace some of the aileron input, and you don't want to give it too much to side load the airplane. All you're giving rudder control for is to keep the wheels parallel to that center line. So you're in a crosswind landing or something like that. Kent said, if a third-class medical reform happens, how does that affect students and the requirement for the third-class medical? So I would imagine they can't just flip a switch one day and say, okay, the medical's gone. People like yourself, Kent, who have a medical, your medical will still be good. It'll still be your student pilot certificate until it expires, which is either 90 days, or if it's just the actual medical, if you're over 40, it'll be 2 years. If you're under 40, it'll be 5 years. And when it's done, it's done. You don't have to do another one, is how I imagine it would happen. But again, it's the government. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something else crazy. Keith said, for the check ride on a simulated engine out, what is the acceptable distance beyond the touchdown point? So, Keith, assuming you're in the traffic pattern, like a power off 180, and private pilot level, they don't expect you to actually hit a point like a short field landing. All they expect you to do is land within the first third of the runway. So look at your runway, measure it out. Okay, my runway is 9,000 feet. Let's make the math real easy. It's 9,000 feet. I need to land within the first 3,000 feet of my runway. So on an emergency engine simulated out, I have to just land within the first third of the runway is all that's required to pass it for the check ride. Ken said, Jason, are there any companies out there that support employees' flight training costs? Well, Kevin, I know MzeroA.com is one of those companies. In fact, all our employees get their licenses, ratings, continuing education for free. And there's a lot of companies like that, usually aviation based. However, I have seen and worked with other companies. I had a very good friend worked for a diesel engine manufacturing company, and they had an airplane and they paid for his flight training, so he could kind of further the business and make it to meetings and that sort of stuff. So look into some aviation related companies that possibly could do that. If Gosh, I mean, why not go all in? Have an aviation job and learn to fly at the same time. I see it all the time. So watch for that. Marcio says, thanks for the spiral landing video. Watched it this morning. It was great. Thanks so much for that, Marcio. By the way, we had so much traffic to that video, like in the first 5 minutes or so, we actually crashed MzeroA.com, the website. Apparently, they say it's a good thing when you get so much traffic, you crash the website. It's not good when you're scrambling, trying to figure out how to fix it. But apparently, it's a good thing. So let's see here. All good stuff. Aaron, I'll send you, Aaron B, I'll send you an email with that. Remind me, though, because I might forget. John G, great job, Jason, and everyone at MzeroA. Enjoyed tonight so much. Can't wait to dig into more of the ground school. He says, are you hiring? John, we're always looking for qualified people with great attitudes and, more importantly, a passion to help others. Listen, guys, thank you so much for all you guys do. You guys truly, I mean it when I say you are the reason we get up so early, stay up so late, do all the crazy things we do. Well, we do it for you guys to help make you guys safer, smarter pilots. If there is anything myself, my beautiful wife Ashley, this great team here at MzeroA.com can do this week to help make you a safer, smarter pilot, please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out. You've got my email address. If you're an online ground school member, you have the direct number to our studio and the office where you can give us a call. Again, groundschoolacademy.com. In basically exactly 2 hours from now, that offer goes away. Once you do get signed up, be sure to go to groundschoolacademy.com/books. That's plural, to start that download and start learning everything you can. Guys, thanks so much for all you guys do. Enjoy the rest of your night, and most importantly, remember that a good pilot is always learning. Have a great night, guys. See ya.